Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now you join me on camera today for those of you who have seen my face before. Hello for those of you that haven't, I apologise. Please try not to recoil in horror. Now, recently I purchased this box from a pawn shop, P-A-W-N, here in the UK, pawn shop, for the Americans watching, sorry. And inside this box should be, or I believe to be, is a pretty rare graphics card. Now there are two models of the specific card in this box. One is slightly different from the other. One carries a platinum name and one doesn't. So the difference between them can mean the difference between the card being rare and the card being not so rare. If it's the one I think it is, then only a few were made, or at least I know that they were harder to come by back in the day. I'm not sure how many units were actually produced, but from what I've read online and from the forums I've seen, the card in here is considered a rare GPU, if it's even rare at all. But we won't actually know until we plug it in and we look at the specs, because the clock speeds and the shader clocks and memory clocks, I think, will be slightly higher if this is the rare version. Now this cost me £50 from a pawn shop here in the UK, and I think that was pretty good despite the card's age, because if it is legitimately the rarer card, and you know me, I am somewhat of a collector, then you can't really put a price on rarity. Obviously, I wouldn't go out and spend £1,000 on a decade-old GPU. But I do like to expand my collection, especially if the price is right. So, I haven't undone this yet. The only thing I've actually done is remove my address from the label. Look at my hairline, it is disappearing fast. Thanks, Dad. Now, this is an absolute beast. Rare or not. Look at the size of that. Now, you may be thinking that looks pretty familiar, right? ASUS Matrix. We have tested a Matrix card before, a 7970 Platinum Edition. Now with this is apparently the ASUS Matrix GTX 580, but it could be the Platinum Edition, in which case it's the slightly harder to come by or rarer card. But the regular 580, I don't think was as difficult to find. Now, according to the model number here, it says Matrix GTX 580p, and I'm wondering if that is the sort of platinum moniker that makes this card the harder to find model. But I can't be 100% sure until we actually fire it up, and I'm not sure if it's going to work with my modern i3-12300. Look at that, massive triple slot cooler there. It's time to actually see if it works and discover whether or not we have the platinum card. I think we have. I think the clock speeds are slightly higher. I think it's clocked to 816 megahertz if it's the platinum one, as opposed to 7 something, but we'll have to find out. It's a great looking card nonetheless. 2 8-pin power slots up there, so pretty thirsty as well. But yeah, without further ado, let's get it in the system. And look at that 100% fan speed button up there as well, just in case it's getting a bit toasty. Now, I didn't know this at the time of recording that piece of video, but the card didn't actually work in any test system I tried. I thought the i3-12300 combo, that was obvious, some older cards don't work. But then I switched to the Ryzen system, where I usually solve all of my compatibility problems, and this didn't work either. The card was just stuck at 100% fan speed, which was very loud, but this was quickly resolved with the push of the button that I showed you previously. The card also didn't work in my i5 LGA 1150 socket platform either, and if all else fails, then this is usually my go-to board for testing older cards, but unfortunately there was nothing, no signal. I then decided that the best course of action was to clean up the card itself, remove some of the dust and repaste the thermal paste. Did that make any sense? Repaste the paste? Anyway, the heatsink was easy to remove, it was a matter of 4 screws, and I replaced the thermal paste on the card, but still we were out of luck, with no signal being read by the monitor whatsoever. I also tried all of the card's connections, including the HDMI, DVI and the display port, with no luck. It was time to bring out the big guns, or the heat gun. Now you may have seen me try to fix a graphics card like this before, namely the GTX 460. This was actually successful. Now this is a temporary fix if nothing else. You can sort of just point the heat gun at a graphics card and sometimes it will bring it back to life for maybe a day, a week, a month, or if you're lucky, longer than that. Considering I had nothing to lose and with £50 spent, I wanted to keep the card regardless because if nothing else it would have been a good paperweight. It's still a collector's card in a way, it's still rare even if it doesn't work, and instead of sending it back for a refund, well, I thought I might as well keep it because at least it would look pretty on my desk. Now despite my chances of this being successful, in my mind being pretty low, after a couple of minutes blasting the heat gun at the card itself, well, I've never been so happy to see these spinning dots, which indicate that not only did we have signal, but the system was booting up into Windows 10. It certainly took about 20 years, or 5 minutes is probably a more accurate assumption, but we were in, and after testing the card with the i5-4460, the backup system, I was even able to slot it back into my i3-12300 machine and boot into Windows all the same. Installing drivers was problem-free, support ended in 2018, but the card worked, we didn't get any black screen problems or artifacts, so we were ready to go. The next thing was to test the actual card's specifications, make sure we did have the Platinum Edition. Although the serial number was pretty convincing on the back, I like to always check Tech Power Up, and you can do this via GPU-Z. You click the lookup button from within the app, and sure enough, well, it took us straight to the GTX 580 Platinum ROG page, and I couldn't be happier to know that my heat gun method had actually worked. So, as you can probably imagine, with driver support long out of date, modern games don't run, not to mention the lack of DX12. That said, older titles like The Witcher 3 here, for example, did run fairly well, even at 1080p, although there were a few problems with stutters and the like. You can probably tell by the frame time graph that the figures were all over the place, but even at 1080p with the low graphical preset and post-processing options, the game was certainly playable, even when exploring busier towns and cities. In Skyrim Special Edition, I took a trip to Bleak Falls Barrow, where the frame rate remained pretty steady. This was 1080p with the medium preset. We could have turned things down a little lower than this, and you'll probably be in your right mind to do so because the game could certainly do with lower visual quality options. Either that, or you could install the original version of Skyrim and have a solid 60 FPS experience, I'm sure. Let's move on to slightly more demanding titles now and see what happens. Red Dead Redemption 2, yeah, the less said the better. 720p with the lowest settings. TAA was enabled and set to medium because the game wouldn't actually let me adjust this option because it was just telling me that we'd exceeded the VRAM limit. What has happened to my horse? Oh dear. Not a good start. This certainly doesn't help our frame rate here. I don't even know what happened. What did I hit? Everything was moving so slowly, I couldn't even tell what happened. But yeah, Red Dead is certainly not playable. Let's just wipe this guy out here. If we can even manage that at 11 FPS, there we go. Nicely done. Let's move on to our next title. Now, I did say we'd be playing more demanding and intensive games, but GTA 5 certainly isn't one of those. With the normal settings all round, the game runs with over 100 FPS, but here with FXAA enabled and MSAA set to 2x, we're still getting over 80 FPS pretty much all of the time. and we could certainly afford to bump up the visual quality settings a little bit more as well, or maybe even bump up the MSAA if that's something that you'd want to do. What is happening with Fortnite here? Yeah, this isn't ideal. Oh, that's better. Fortnite seems to be playable. This is DX11 mode, of course, just because otherwise it won't start. We could have chose performance mode, I suppose, but low with 85% resolution scaling meant that we saw at least 60 FPS on average. There will be a few problems with the 1.1% lows, as you might expect, but if you want to play Fortnite and you've got an old card like this, even a cheaper version of the GTX 580, you shouldn't really have that many issues. So yeah, Fortnite, it's a fun online game and you're good to go with an older card, a 10 or 11 year old card like the 580. We can add this one to the collection, the ASUS ROG Platinum Matrix GPU. This is already shaping up to be one of my favourites in terms of how it looks, and hopefully the heat gun trick will keep it alive for at least a few more weeks, but it will probably just live out the rest of its days as a paperweight anyway. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, leave a dislike if you didn't. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.